Back to the assignment submission form. All right, so this is our production pipeline. The whole purpose of this first assignment is to go through how do we take our stuff off to a different area. So the first half of the semester, we've brought stuff into a gaming engine. Now we're bringing stuff into a rendering engine. That way we can actually render stuff out and make it look cooler than just a gaming engine type thing. The gaming engine is nice because it is something we can interact with. We can actually make, stuff that people can click on and do things with and show off our work a different way. A lot of the work around here especially is done with production stuff, so they do have these things where they want you to actually render stuff out so they can use it in movies or use it in commercials or use it wherever, ads. So we'll be going through the steps of taking an item from Maya to Substance and then rendering it in Arnold. Arnold is the rendering engine that we went through last class. There's other ones out there. V-Ray is another one. Mental Ray is another one. RenderMan is another one. They all work in a similar way, but they all have their strong points and weak points, okay? We're using Arnold because its strongest point is that it's free. It does do a lot of cool stuff, but for us, it's free, so we use Arnold. You can't do movies right out of Arnold. We have to do a little workaround, which I'm going to show today too, in case you want to render out a movie or when you do it for the next assignment. Our learning objectives, modeling a simple object, we're using the gear, so it's not really a whole lot of modeling we're doing, basically just kind of changing some settings. Laying out UVs across several tiles. This is where, coming back to that production side of where we really can create high-res textures by taking that UV set and spanning it across several areas so that we can get a lot of detail in each area. Taking something like the gear, putting it into one, or 50 years and putting it into one, our texture would be basically like too blocky. Assign basic textures in Substance. Export all tiles used in Maya. Set up your Arnold material lights, ambient occlusion, and Z-depth. And then composite in Nuke and render a still. Okay, so this is a common workflow that you'll see. And any of these where it says pipeline, that's what we're doing, is we're dealing with a way to take our item from the start of the project to the end of the project. Every company has their own way to do that. Some companies may actually have people working on the textures while somebody else is working on the modeling, while somebody else is working on the rendering. Some of the stuff like the Nuke side, there's even people that work on just like scripts where they would basically make that whole process of using Nuke a lot easier because they write little scripts that allow them to make that process pretty automated. All right, let me zoom out and scroll down so we can see the next part. So for your turn-ins, you're turning in your essentials, okay? So not everything. I just want your images, your scenes, and your textures. So you're going to have two images. One will be a before Nuke, one will be an after Nuke. So you'll have both of those images that you're turning in. Your scene is your very last scene that you created. So if you made 50 copies, then you may have 50, just turn in the last one. And then any textures that you built inside of Substance that you've exported, I want the textures for that, okay? So that's all the stuff that I need turned in. Your still is the before and after of Nuke. And then both of those images should be at 3,000 pixels by 2,400 pixels. And then the points possible for this one is 2. All right, any questions on the sheets? 3,000 pixels by 2,400. And remember, that's on your little cheat sheet thing as well. Also remember, if I've returned one of your assignment sheets, that you have signed it or you're resubmitting it and then you get that back to me, because otherwise you get no points inside Canvas for an assignment you've turned in if I don't have the sheet back. Cool? The due date will be the end of day today. Okay? Most of you look like you're at the point where you're just kind of rendering it out and doing the Nuke stuff. The Nuke is pretty quick once you get it rendered out. The rendering is going to probably take longer than the Nuke. Production pipeline. Cool? All right. So, oops, I don't want to cancel that. Let me just save it. All right, so now I'm going to show our next assignment, which is going to be a Pokeball. So this is, that looks good. So this will be actually like an animated rendering out image. So the biggest challenge in this one is not the texturing or the lighting or the animation. The biggest challenge is obviously modeling the Pokeball. And it's actually the hardest part of this is modeling the basic shell, and then everything else is pretty easy just to add on top of it. Okay? No. I love when we do that because I want you to see how that works out. Okay, so start with a sphere, and then where do we go? No. Because this is how I do it. When I model something, I start with a very basic shape. I want this to be a sphere shape.
I thought it was going to be start with a cube.
You could do that too.
I wouldn't want to.
Right?
I guess first thing I would do is I would take that middle part and I would extrude it inwards.
Okay. So these faces here?
Yeah.
Which ones? These ones or these ones?
I would find a way to make. Yeah, I was going to say, there's got to be a way to make the middle one.
Mm-hmm. So we can go over here to the sphere and then change our subdivisions in the height. And so we get more subdivisions, and that'll let us extrude both of those out, right? So that's a possibility. We could also grab this edge.
Like bevel it?
Bevel it, yep. And now we'll have a center one. And then we could do, like you said, extrude that in. Right? Now when I do the circle, this is the hard part. This is the part that is always going to get us. Because we think we can just grab these pieces here and let's say delete it and then smooth it. Well, that doesn't create a circle. That looks pretty ugly. Put it on top of it.
Yeah.
But I may want, like, let's say on mine, I have lenses, and I want to be able to see into those lenses. Okay? So I want to see the glass basically all the way through this shape. Or maybe I have an iris that opens and closes. I want to see those pieces. So if I just drop a shape on top of that, I can't see inside the shape. So I actually need to cut this out somehow. Okay? Now the other way that I've tried doing this is to rotate it like that. And that gives me like a perfect circle right there. And then I can, let's say, subtract that one, and then I can just delete it. So that gives me a pretty easy way to create that little eye shape, but then we lose something else. Anytime we change one thing, we lose something else. So now I don't have that nice clean edge because now this gets thicker as it goes around and then gets pointy way in the back. Okay? So there's always trade-offs as to how you model something, and sometimes you will go through 2, 3, 4, or 5 different iterations before you get to that one that's going to work. So don't be afraid to just screw around and play with something until you find the way that is going to work for you. So first, before I start doing anything, make a project, hit new, put in my 20 folder and call it Sarcona Pokeball. And then hit accept, and then there we go. Okay. So the way that I did this one is I want to keep everything symmetrical because symmetry is going to help us out a whole lot. If it's not symmetrical, we're going to have a hard time lining up stuff. So I'm going to take these faces here, and then I'm going to shift right click and then go to circular eyes. And then that creates a circle.
That's weird.
Yep. And it's twisted, so then I twist this back so that it's straight. There we go. And then I can just kind of scale this down a little bit and then maybe push it in a little bit and then delete it. Okay? So that gives me a pretty good circle. Now when I hit smooth, now I have a nice smooth opening right there. Okay? Now before circular eyes was there, we would have to manually move all those points. So before version 2018, we'd have to do that. There's other ways too, but that's how that one works. So now to create that opening, I'm going to do what you suggested, which is beveling this. Maybe take that down to 0.25, and then just deleting that. Okay? Now the reason I'm deleting it is because I want to keep the inside as a separate piece just to make it a little bit easier to lay out the UVs and all that. So now I'm going to grab my edges all the way around, both sides, extrude it, and then just push it in. So now it has a lip that goes all the way around the entire thing. Now I can create that little lip, or the little area that goes around that. So I'm going to go to Create Polygon Cylinder. I'm going to size it up so that it fits inside there. That looks good. And then I'm going to take my caps to 0 so it makes it easier just to select this cap and delete it. And then scale that down. And then so I don't have a piece right here, I'm just going to delete these faces. And then just slide, oops, these two closer to that. Okay, so there's my Pokeball. Now it looks really horrible right now, but it'll look better. So I'm going to add bevels to this, bevels around this piece. Oops. The inside doesn't need one. I don't know why I clicked that. We're going to put bevels here, bevels there. Same thing on the bottom. Bevel here, bevel there. So that looks like I got them all. I have all the bevel or edges here all the way around. And now I can bevel this pretty tight, like 0.2 and 2 segments. Whoop, I missed one. Yep, I missed that one. There we go. It's important you see these things right off the bat, otherwise you have to go back and delete stuff. There we go. So that looks nice and smooth. And you'll see this little lip that's right there, that looks nice as well. Oh, I missed another one. Dang it. That. And good. All right, bevel again. 0.2. Yep. Right, not the inside, because there's nothing really for it to bevel there, and we won't actually see the inside part because this is covering it, and then we'll have a lens actually that's going to fit right inside that circle. All right, so that looks pretty good. Now to create the lens, I just create a cylinder. I rotate it, and this is why we've kept everything nice and symmetrical, is because that should fit perfectly right inside there. Had I moved it off center, had I picked different edges or faces that weren't lined up perfectly with the center, it wouldn't work. It would be very difficult for me to line this up. So I'm going to take my divisions down to, let's say 12, that looks good. Take my caps down to 0. And then it's simply a matter of just kind of shaping what this lens would look like. Okay, so it's going to have some thickness like this. I'm going to extrude it and push it in some like that. Okay, so this will go back to, that's the other side of it right there. Okay, otherwise I'm pushing it through the back side of that. I don't want to do that. All right, so now when I hit 3, you can see how it's going to smooth it out. And then I just need bevels to hold the shape so that it doesn't like round off too much. And there. So I grabbed faces. I'm going to add bevels to those. 0.05 maybe, and 2 segments. And then edges. That actually looks pretty good, maybe 0.2. There we go. So that seems to look good there, maybe a little bit bigger. Oops, not too big. Nope, I think I need to extrude it a little bit. This is where Maya's history comes in handy, because I can go to that first extrude I did, which was the thickness, and if I just click on it, hit T, then I can edit the thickness of that. There we go. That worked good. Now I'm going to add some glass to this, so I'm going to create a sphere. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. Oops. And then I'm going to delete all the stuff that's not part of the glass. That. Okay, so this is basically just like a sheet of glass that would be my lens. That's good. So I just need to fit that inside here. And again, because I have this symmetrical, it's very easy to line this up. If it wasn't, then it wouldn't work very good. I also want to give this some thickness, so I'm going to extrude that piece of glass and give it just a little bit of thickness. That's way too much. 0.005. Yep, that's good. Just a little bit of thickness. And then I'm going to duplicate it and scoot it back, and then duplicate it and scoot it back again. Okay, just so I have like these different kind of refractive materials in there. And probably need to shrink it down just a tiny bit more. There you go. And then maybe this end one would be a bit further out like that. So as I'm modeling this, what I'm doing is I'm looking at the lines, because I don't want these to blend in too much like that where it looks like it might be an accident. I want there to be a distinct line like that. That way it's like, okay, you definitely meant to do that. On the cap here, I can insert a couple edge loops. Go ahead and extrude some pieces. So I'm just extruding it a couple times right there just to give it some shape. Maybe I'll do the same thing right here. I'm not liking that. Let me hit 1 on this because I think, yeah, I didn't. Let me grab that again, extrude. I'm just going to scale it in like this. That's good. There we go. So that's a good enough start. I can add some bevels to that to really hold the shape a bit better. So that's good. Okay. And then what I did up here is I just added some just shapes. Okay. Once you have the basic shape of the Pokeball, you can really just kind of go crazy and just customize it however you want. If you want to add lines or ridges or whatever it is, you can really play with it. So I'm just going to extrude this. Let's say push it in a little bit and maybe scale it a little bit. And then extrude it again and then push it down, extrude it again, push it down. Then I'm going to grab that ring and extrude that up a little bit, extrude it again. Maybe scale that in some. And then this will be a little bit different design than the other one. Now I'm going to grab all of these and extrude them. And I want to create like little, basically like little circles all the way around this. So to do that, I can't just scale this because that doesn't work. I have to make sure I say keep faces together is off. And then I'll create these like little circles. 0.2, 0.1. There we go, that's good. And then I'll extrude again, push it in a little bit, extrude again, push it in a little bit. Okay, so that's kind of a neat little pattern that's on top of him. That's cool. And then let's say I want a little ring to go around here. I just extrude that. Give it a little offset. Oops, too much offset. There we go. Extrude it again, push that in, extrude it again, push it in again. There we go. Okay, so you can really go crazy with what you want to design here. You can also add stuff on top of him. So in mine, I have these like chains, like these links that are attached to him. In order to do that, I have to think about, okay, I can't just put a torus, which is how I would create that. I can't just take a torus and just stick it there because that's not what a chain link looks like. If you need reference, look up a chain link, okay? I want to take the divisions down to about 8. I want to take my section radius down to about 0.25, like that. I'm going to scale this so that it's about the right size. And obviously there's a scale with, you know, how big is the chain versus how big is my guy. That looks good there. And then I'm going to go to my vertices and just grab these vertices and move it that way. And grab these vertices and move it that way. And that will give me a chain link. Especially when I hit 3, it'll look more like a chain link. Okay? But it still has to connect to him somehow. That's not how chain link things get connected to things. So what I want to do is basically make a plate that is perfectly contoured to him. And the way that I do that, I'm just going to put one chain back here, okay, is I'm going to duplicate his shape. I'll just pull it back just so we can see how I do this. And I want the chain to be attached right there. So I grab the faces I want, I hold Shift, grab everything else, and delete. Whoops. So now I have this piece. If I reset the position, That's perfectly lined up with my shape. And then all I have to do is just extrude it and pull it out, and then just add some bevels around the top and the corners. Whoops, not there, right there, right there. So now I hit 3, and 3 on that. So that looks pretty good. I don't need these bottom faces. That's just extra stuff that I don't need, so I can just delete those. And now when I hit 3, that looks pretty good. I may have to adjust the position of it just slightly. Just kind of soften it in there. That's good. Cool. All right, so now I have a chain link. I'm going to put it like that. Okay, now because I don't need the other part of that, I'm going to delete it, but first I'm going to duplicate this and then delete the inside. And then now I can start to lay out what my chain link is going to look like. Okay, so your assignment is just the Pokeball, but think about other things you may want to add to your scene to make it look more interesting. Okay, so if I wanted that again, I would duplicate it, I would rotate it, and then position it. Think about how the chain would actually be positioned. Okay, so this chain link goes like this, and then the next chain link should go down as well. Like that. It would not be sticking up in the air like this. That doesn't make sense as to why it would do that, unless it's connected to the wall here. Cool. All right. So you're going to go through, you're going to model out your Pokeball shape. Make sure it has the body there. Make sure it has some decorations on him. Make sure it has some sort of lens system. Then once you get to this point, then it's going to be creating the UVs for him. Now, the UVs for this one are no different than the UVs we've set up for every other object inside of our scene. It starts with just laying out the basic shapes and then cutting stuff out. So if I go to my UV editor and I go to, close this, there we go. And I start off with just grabbing all the pieces and doing an unfold. Let me look at what this looks like in that. Mesh has non-manifold. Well, then fix it. Something's wrong with it, so I'm going to go to cleanup and say clean up my non-manifold. All right, so let's try that again. Unfold, unfold. All right, well, it's just being stupid now. So I'm just going to go to spherical projection and then do an unfold. There we go. And now that seems to be working. So I don't need to see the texture in here. Oops. Now, I know this is not going to be perfect right off the bat, so I need to obviously tweak it. So this is how it cut the bottom. That's fine. I know that I can probably take all of these faces that are here, maybe even one more or two more rows out, and I can probably just do a planar map on it. Now I've set my planar map, instead of XYZ here, I've set it to best plane. And what Maya will do is just figure out what's the best direction. So if it's facing left, it'll do that. If it's facing top, it'll do that. So there's that one, and I'll do the same thing on the top. So I'm just going to grab all those top faces and do a planar on that as well. There we go. And now I can grab everything again, do an unfold, do a layout just to kind of get my pieces together. And then I can go through and inspect. Now where my areas I'm going to have issues with are probably right here, where it gets really complex with all these extrudes in and pushed and whatever. It's going to get complex there. And the best way that I found to do that on my other one is just to cut those areas off. So I'm just going to cut right at the bottom of that. I've already cut at the top of it. And I have a random piece right here that I don't want just randomly pieced. So I'm just going to move and sew that piece back in. I don't know where he was doing. There we go. So I'm going to unfold this again. There we go. That's much better. These are much cleaner. If I see any rectangles anywhere, that means that I did not freeze my transformations. So make sure my transformations are frozen. I didn't scale him, so he's fine already. But it's always safe bet to do that. Same thing on every other piece, right? So his UVs are laid out. That's all I had to do. You can see how many pieces I have left with him. That's how many pieces I needed, and that's perfect. It looks great. When I go to this, I'm going to do the same thing. If it helps, isolate your objects. Just use that little isolate button so you can focus on just the object. I start off with grabbing my shell and unfolding, seeing where that gets me. Now I know with this shape, it's smoothed, so I may have to make sure I'm also hit on one so that I don't see the smoothed out version. I also need to make sure that I freeze my transforms. Very easy to forget to do that. Unfold again. Okay, it's still good. All right, so let me grab this piece. And I think I need to break off that bottom because that's giving me some issues. So I'm going to click on the bottom face and grow my selection. So I'm just using the shift greater than sign. And then I will planar map that piece. And then this one I'm just going to cut. There we go. And then I'll lay it out again. Now I'm doing the layout each time because it helps me see if they're all the same size and all uniform. Once I know that they're uniform pieces, I don't need to keep laying it out. I know that it's good, so I'm happy with that. So then I would just keep going around. I would make sure the UVs are laid out in this piece. I do need to also freeze transforms on it again. Because this is broken up into two pieces, I probably want to connect those. There we go. Now the issue that you're probably going to run into as well is with the chain links. If you do all the chain links, like you get them positioned first, and then you come back and start to lay out the UVs, you have to lay out the UVs for each one of those chain links, right? Because they have to have their UVs laid out. The default UVs for this are square. You can see they definitely don't look correct. Even if I freeze the transforms and then do an unfold, it's still not going to look as good as it could. Okay, because we'll still get some areas in here that are stretched out somewhere. Probably on the inside where we really can't see it. Okay, so it's not as bad as I was expecting it to be. Oh, there they go, right there. So we can see how right here they're kind of like jaggedy. So on mine, I just kind of like broke this in half. And then when I unfold it, that helps get rid of some of the jaggediness. It may need a cut down the middle as well. There we go. No jaggediness there. Okay. So once we have one of these laid out, then I would have to go through and lay it out for this one as well, doing basically that same process. Now you can copy UVs from one item to another item. If I go to this one and I shift click that one, and I go to Mesh, Transfer Attributes, I tell it to do the components space, and hit transfer, it'll actually copy the UVs from one to the other. So then I don't have to do that again. Now where it doesn't work, let me undo that for a second right there. I'm just going to duplicate this and then just Shift D so you can see this process. Oops. All right, so here's all my chain links. So this one is laid out right here. I can't grab all of these and do that to it. I can't go to Mesh, Transfer Attributes, and hit that and have it work. It'll only do it to the next one. So when I click one and then grab the next one and do that, and do that transfer attributes, it'll transfer it that way. But then I have to do this each time. Click one, shift click the next. Click one, shift click the next. Okay? There we go. And then, of course, I would delete my history so nothing freaks out. Cool. Now, I could also, come on, there it is, do a little bit of scripting. So I don't expect you to learn scripting in this class, but I just want to show it just so you're aware of it. So everything inside Maya is basically commands. It's just basic little scripts that are running. If we find that there's a script that we're constantly running over and over and over again, or we're kind of doing a workaround to get the script to work the way we want it to, it's always best to try to see if there's a solution out there or one we can make that will make it easier. So this is one that I put together probably about 20 minutes of a script. So this is done in Python, so if you wanted more scripting knowledge, you would study Python and then learn how to apply that inside Maya. But basically, it selects the objects, and then it basically selects the first object, grabs the next one that's been selected, and then does that transfer attribute. Then goes to the next one on the list, makes sure the first one's still selected, then goes to the next one and does it. So it automatically does this thing for me over and over and over again, and can save me basically hours of time. Here is one, I believe this one is not done. No. So this one is not done, so I'm just going to duplicate it and do that. Because if you have a chain link, let's say I had a fence or I had something crazy, like that's a lot of stuff for me to be clicking the first one, shift clicking, and then transfer attributes. It's incredibly a lot of waste of time. So first, let me make sure that this is correct. Yes, that's correct. Then I'm going to shift click all these. And then I'm going to run my script, so I just highlight it all and hit Control Enter. It gives me an error just because of something I have in there, but that's no big deal. But now if I go to any of these, you'll see that all their UVs are now exactly the same. Okay? So I'll put that script up on Canvas so you can use it, but just be aware that there's things inside Maya you can really get like deep into if you want to. That's one of the things I love about it because it's so intense. You can do so much stuff with it. I'm going to delete history on this, just so you're aware why I'm deleting history every time I do that. Because the UV placement for all of these is based on the UV position for this one. If I move that one's UVs, all of these will get updated too. And so when I do something like a layout or an unfold, it updates all of them. And if I tried to move these UVs at the end, it would freak out. So I always lay out the UVs and then delete the history. Cool. All right. So once you have your UVs laid out, let me go and delete all this extra stuff I have in here that's random. There we go. Once you have your UVs laid out in your object, then the process is going to be basically going into Substance and laying out the textures for your stuff. For this scene, if I can grab all my geometry and not the lights or textures, there we go. I have 3 UV sets because I want to make sure that I'm optimizing my stuff. One UV set is just the chains. Okay, so I basically laid out all the chains in one UV and then scooted it over. That way my chains and my Pokeball aren't competing for the same UV space. So one of these is the Pokeball, one of these is the chain, and then the last one is just the environment. Okay, and I made sure that the checkerboard size on each one was pretty consistent from one to the other. There may have been a little bit of sway, but for the most part they're all exactly-ish the same size. So then I went into Substance, played with my textures inside of Substance, got them all laid out how I wanted to get them laid out, and then I exported them and brought them back into Maya. Now, the placement for it, it's exactly the same thing we just did on the production pipeline. Okay, there's no difference there. You still connect all your textures to an AI standard surface. My color goes to color, my metalness goes to metalness, roughness goes to roughness. My bump or my normal map goes to the bump map. All of that's exactly the same. I still have to make sure that I change this to UDIM from ARI and hit generate preview. I still have to make sure that on my metalness ones that I do that as well as clicking this alpha's luminance. The only difference that you may have is if you're using glass, the glass has to be a separate shader. Otherwise, Maya reads the textures as being basically transparent on all of them. So I made basically a separate texture for the glass here, and then under transmission, from substance, I exported a transparency map for the glass, okay? Now, if I didn't want to go through the hassle of doing that, I could just play with the transparency here, okay? So whatever texture you put on there, I can simply just take this weight and just slide it down to control how transparent it is. And then on each item that's transparent, you have to make sure that under your Arnold shape, it's not set to opaque, because otherwise you're going to get a solid piece of glass, which is weird, versus an opaque piece of glass. Okay, so the exact same thing. I don't have to go over that again. The next thing I want to show is the lighting for this, okay, because now we have a little bit more dramatic lighting than we had in the other one. So let me just go to a new scene just so we can see this kind of cleanly. And I like to do my lighting before I do any actual texture dropping in. That way it's a lot quicker, because Arnold isn't trying to calculate my lights every 2 seconds plus my textures. Okay, so just for placement's sake, there's my Pokeball, and there's a little environment for him to be in. So I open up the renderer. This is just every time I do this, it's the same process. I usually have another screen, and that goes there. I can't see anything, so I have to go under Arnold and add in a sky dome light. This gives me just some very generic kind of like scene lighting. I typically take the intensity down, okay? For something like mine, which was kind of moody, I went pretty low with it. All right, so that looks good enough. Then I created an area light. And then because this is Arnold, the light intensity has to be skyrocketed high, probably like 1,000 or something, okay? The smaller the light, the more focused that shadow is. The bigger the light, the softer that shadow is. So for mine, I wanted a very harsh light because I wanted it to seem like there's a spotlight on my guy. So I kept it pretty small. I also changed the shape of the light. Instead of it being a quad, which is obviously square, I changed it to a disc. Now you don't see a whole lot of change here, but you will like in reflections and stuff, okay? Because the reflection would then have that softness or that circle around it. That's pretty much all I did for the light. In my render settings, just so you know, for this one, there is no ambient occlusion or depth of field in this. Okay, this is a straight render right out of Maya, because with this fog that's here, those two things don't work. We would have to do it a different way. So there's no extra AOVs on this. It's just straight this kind of stuff. So under environment in the render settings, I'm going to go to atmosphere, and every time I will click the wrong one. It does not matter what I do. I always think it's the right one, and I click the wrong one. So I'm going to click this one this time, and that's the correct one. Cool. Okay, so that's the one that I wanted. So this is basically going to create a fog inside the scene. You can't see the fog right now because the density is 0. So once I crank the density up to 0.05, then we can start to see this fog that's now inside the scene. Fog is basically a volume cloud, misty type thing in the air. The brighter my light is, the brighter that fog is going to be. So now I have to play a balancing game between my light's brightness and the density of the fog. So let me hit my stop button here. There we go. So I'm going to pull this back. And this is really going to slow down your station when you start kicking this stuff on. And then I'm going to hit refresh. There we go. So now you can see how it looks like there's more of a fog inside the scene than there was a second ago, okay? I'm going to go back to my fog. So if I go to my attribute editor, I can go to the atmosphere volume. And instead of this color being white, which definitely you could change the color of it, I'm going to click the map button, go to my 3D textures, and put in a volume noise. And what this will do is instead of my fog being one consistently thick fog, it will give like splotches and transparency to it. So now, just by doing that, I'll re-render this. And we should see a little bit of a difference here. You can kind of see a pattern inside there, more like grain. This little 3D thing is that. So the bigger this is, the bigger those grain chunks are going to be. So I'm going to make this pretty big. Hit the render button again. And now you can definitely see some of that pattern coming in. Yes, cool. And now because I did that, my light is now not as intense. So I'm going to go back to my fog, and I'm going to take the attenuation up. This is where I want to have this play button on. All right, so that should soften some of the fog a little bit. And then I'm going to go to my light. And I'm going to take the intensity of the light up. So instead of it being at 1,000, I'm going to put it at 2,500. And instead of it being as big as it is, I'm going to switch to my channel box and make the lights scale like 2. Oops, that's not the light. This is why it's nice to have extra views. 0.2. There we go. And then I'll take my sky dome intensity down as well. All right, so now it's just going to be a matter of playing with the settings to get what I want. So maybe I want the density to be even lower, 0.01. I'm going to go to my volume noise and maybe play with some of this here. I want just more darkness inside there. There we go. And sometimes you have to close your render view and then reopen it. Just verify that you're getting the correct settings. I should be getting a bit more drastic of a lighting situation here. Yeah, you can definitely see the fog popping in there, okay? So that's pretty much what I did for my scene. Let me go and show you my actual settings just so you can see it. So I have this light here. 450 was its intensity, 1 was the exposure. I used color temperature to tint the light, so it was more blue because I wanted it to look a little bit colder. Cancel that. So the lighting here is actually like a colder coloring versus something that's more orange. It helped kind of sell the scene a little bit more. Oh, I did adjust the spread. That's what I adjusted. So on my disk, I put the spread to 0.1, and that's what really kind of focused that light in there. And then the fog was what I said the fog was going to be. Cool. And then I added an extra light just to kind of light up some more of this room here. Initially, what I was getting was this very dark scene, like that. And I added that extra light just to help kind of fill in some of the scene, just so I could see some of this texture in here. Which you can't see. There you go. I can see it better. All right. Cool. So that was the gist of it. So this fog that's coming in there, that's that light shining on it, creating that fog, or creating the light lighting it up. I really had to crank it up and really play with the settings in order to get these little blooms and to get this little spot there. It's very easy to go kind of overboard and do something like that with the fog, or do something like that which is not as effective. So you really got to play with it to get nice results. Also, I picked a nice camera angle, so we see the chains, we see the Pokeball. Cool. All right. So if you get a chance today, if you get a chance over break, whatever it is, I would say definitely start playing with this. The more time you spend on this, typically the better the results are going to be, and you'll be able to create something pretty cool. And obviously the next assignment will be easier. That's going to be a robot arm, but that'll be more product-based robot arm, not substance texturing robot arm. Okay? Questions, Ed, on this?